Welcome back to this week's episode of Success Through Connections, and I'm Zelda. I'm your host. I want to tell you a little bit about our guest today and how I met him. So, today, our guest is I don't know if he's still a practicing attorney, but he is an attorney by trade, and his name is David Goldwich. So, let me tell you how I got him to be on the podcast. I was really looking for someone who could talk about negotiations because, as business owners and businesses, we often need to negotiate a salary or a contract or something. And so I thought negotiations would be a great topic. And so I was looking on LinkedIn and I was looking at speakers who are professional speakers in South Florida. And I came across David Goldwich and I thought, well, that's different. I happen to know a fellow in Jacksonville, Florida, in the insurance adjusting business, and his name is Mark Goldwich. And he's from South Florida. I wonder if they're connected, if they're related. They have to be. And sure enough, David says, yeah, we're brothers. So that is how I knew David, and I went, "Oh, this is gonna be great," because I think Mark is wonderful. I refer people to him all the time. Hopefully not too often, but whenever they do need somebody who's in the insurance business, that's my go-to guy is Mark. So, yeah. So, David, welcome to our show, and I'm gonna tell a little bit about you. You are an attorney, and you practiced for 10 years, and I know that you say that now you don't sue anybody. Yay! You're not suing people. And your motto is all progress begins with a new idea. I love that. It does begin with a new idea. I know that you like to inspire people to make breakthroughs with and make changes with their personal and their professional life. I think that's awesome. I know that you've been an author of numerous articles and you've written 5 books, and your latest one is called Win Win An Everyday Guide to Negotiating. So, welcome to the show, David.
Thank you for inviting me, Zelda. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. So, I like to dive right in. I mean, negotiation. Well, I do it when I'm negotiating for sponsors for the show. I do it when I'm negotiating a contract for real estate. And I know people, we always have to deal with contracts and negotiation for all kinds of things. So, I know you have to be prepared. What's the first thing you tell people on how you should prepare when you're getting ready to go into a negotiation?
It depends on the type of negotiation. If it's very price centered, there's a lot less you can do because an extra dollar for me is one less for you. So we're fighting over money. So you might want to look at other, what we call resources or things that you can offer, currencies, they're often called, other than price. But once you decide on your general strategy, it really is all about preparation. You want to ask yourself a lot of questions. What do I want to get out of this deal? What do I think the other guy wants to get? If I can't get what I want from this guy, I still have to satisfy my needs somewhere else. Where else can I go? And where else can he go? And what strategy or tactics do I expect him to use? How might I counter those? There's a lot of thinking before you even pick up the phone to say hello.
This is true. I know for me in real estate, we negotiate over price maybe first, but there's so many other things that can
Right.
come into play for it. Yeah. So there's a lot of times the first offer, then you're having a counter offer. So how do you stop that back and forth so that things can go your way?
Well, the back and forth is going your way. A lot of times people think they want a yes right away. And if you do get an immediate yes, you might think that was too easy.
Yeah.
Maybe I could have gotten a better deal. So if you get a few no's first and then eventually you get to a yes, you can be pretty confident that you're getting about the best deal you could get.
Think it's sometimes it's important to know basically what you really want before you go into those negotiations.
Right,
It's like, yeah, it's like, okay, like when I'm doing a real estate deal, it's like, do you really want the washer and dryer to take with you to the new place? It's like, let's leave that as something you can throw in to give them a win. So
right,
like that.
right.
Yeah, like it. We throw that in. In fact, I remember that with your brother once was the washer and dryer. Yeah. So I've heard that you should never accept the first offer when bargaining, but is that really true?
For the most part, if it's a small stakes negotiation, it may not matter to you. But as we just said, if that first offer is accepted too easily, you might think, well, I could have done better. and you don't want the other person to think that they could have done better. They expect you to go back and forth, and you have to play the game. So a lot of times, for example, if you say, "This is really my best offer," they won't believe you because that's not how negotiation works. So you play the game, you do the back and forth a little bit, and why accept the first offer if you know you can do better and if you want the other person to feel like they're getting a better deal.
And isn't it good for people to feel like they have a win-win?
Right. A win-win is one of those things that everybody talks about, but few people really know how to achieve consistently. A win-win is not just when, "Hey, I got a good deal, you got a good deal, everybody's happy, win-win." No, a win-win is when both parties get the best possible deal given the variables of that negotiation. When you're optimizing and maximizing the value that you're allocating between the parties, that would be the true win-win. It's not easy to get, but it doesn't have to be a perfect win-win. As long as you learn some of the techniques, you can get better results in almost all of your negotiations.
So for somebody who's give us some tips if you could on somebody who's going in and they are wanting to negotiate a salary.
Okay, that's a little tricky because we don't always negotiate salaries. In the old days, it was quite common. Now, a lot of times, the salary is set and they don't let you negotiate for obvious reasons. And another reason is a lot of people are not indispensable. Okay.
Good.
If you're indispensable, you can get whatever you want.
Yeah.
But most people
We
are
call that the
fairly,
business owner.
yeah, most people are fairly easily replaced. So you have to be fairly reasonable. But generally speaking, if you're negotiating for salary, the old conventional wisdom is still pretty true, which is you've got to do your research, know what the market is for people like you, be able to justify what value you add, and just sell yourself.
Mhm. So how about I was watching something on a social media channel once and I thought, "Oh, that's kind of interesting." They were talking about negotiating subscriptions. We all sign up for all these things like it could be, Netflix or internet and all that. What are some great tips or at least a couple of tips anyway on how to negotiate when you say I'm going to cancel that because they just went up in price? Are there some negotiation tips you can share with us on something along those lines?
I don't have many subscriptions, but I've been in that similar situation. For example, I used to travel throughout Asia quite a bit. And a lot of times my client would book me into a hotel, and sometimes breakfast wasn't included. And so I would ask the person at the desk if I can get breakfast. It's just a muffin and some yogurt, doesn't really cost anything, but it would make me happy. It's my first time at this hotel. I hope you can work with me on this. And almost always they will, because the buffet, usually it's a buffet over there. Most of it's going to get thrown away anyway. If you're nice and if they see a chance to do something for you, a lot of that doesn't really cost them anything. A lot of times they like to do that. So with subscriptions, it's kind of like in the old days where you could negotiate your or waive your bank credit card fee, the annual fee. If you called and asked, not many people knew about it, but if you did it, they would usually say yes. Now, when you call them, the first thing they ask is if you'd like to waive your fee, press one. So everybody knows it. It's not a secret anymore. But you're right. If they do raise the price, or if you're bundling certain things, there's probably a lot of room because if they lose you as a customer, they've got to spend a certain quantum to find a replacement customer for you before they can even hire the next one to grow their business. So they don't really like to lose customers. If you're reasonable, if you've got a good rationale, it certainly doesn't cost you anything to try. And a lot of times you can be persuasive.
So a lot of times, David, when you're calling because it's a subscription, I mean, I subscribe to different mailing services, email mailing services, and the prices kept going up. So I've learned that sometimes you don't want to talk to the person who answers the phone. You want to go to the superior,
Right.
their manager, because they're the ones who can negotiate. Okay, we understand we've gone up in price. We'll give you a month free or something like that. That's the negotiation. It's what we're going to give you, but it's sometimes knowing the right person to talk to on those things.
Yeah, it often is. And as you say, the person who answers the phone is usually not the right person. They're often in a call center on some remote island. They don't really know anything about what they're doing. They
Yes.
just have a script.
Yes.
But the supervisors or the more senior people, they've got the discretion and the authority to make some changes for you.
Yes. And they often will. It's kind of something that you just mentioned a minute ago, which is basically you have to the yogurt. Ask.
Right,
The worst that can happen is they go, "No, I can't help you with that."
right.
Right? So, should always ask. So, if it's sometimes difficult to negotiate when you really need what this other person is offering, but maybe it is the price or something's wrong with it. So, what are some tips for a backup plan when they've got what you want, but maybe the price just isn't right?
That's a very common problem, more so in certain cultures. I've done a lot of negotiation training in India, and they tend to be pretty tough negotiators. And in fact, one time a group of people told me they would only come to my course if I could teach them how to do that. And I guess they were happy because they came and came back the next year. But the trick is if you know they can't negotiate with anybody else. For example, the government says you're going to do the deal with my friend's company. You
Mm,
have no choice. But there's still some things you can do. You can negotiate the quantity, you can negotiate some other currencies or variables to work with them. You can possibly, on some occasions, even do it in house. It may take a lot of extra work, but if the stakes are high enough, for example, Elon Musk throughout his career has been pretty good about this. When there's only one supplier for a part he needs for his rockets, like a valve or something very specialized, there's not really much choice, but he will learn to do it in house and do it a lot more cheaply that way. Not everybody has that authority to make that decision. And so, what I tell the folks in India, if you don't have the authority, then maybe your job is to persuade your boss that he needs to do this.
oh, that's brilliant. Yeah. Negotiate with the boss because he has the power. Yes. So you mentioned to me that there are some types of negotiating powers. Tell me about a little bit about that. I don't understand that.
There's really a lot. There's authority, there's the credibility of your company. For example, a Walmart or an Amazon, just because they have that name on the business card gives them a certain amount of clout.
Sure.
There's expertise, there's who you know, which I'm sure is something near and dear to your heart, and preparation. There's timing. There's just so many things you can play with, especially if you're creative.
Hmm. I know one thing that I was taught very early on when I was in a different career, special events. I wanted to win a contract with a major, like it was Anheuser-Busch. I wanted to win that contract, and I was up against national people. And the advice was, "Do your homework," which brought us basically, it was like our first question, which was, "How do you prepare for a negotiation?" Do your
Right.
homework. Learn everything you can about that company.
Exactly. And sometimes the advantage might be, well, these other agencies have so much business, they're not going to really fight for you the way I will. So that's a possibility. How do you differentiate yourself? How do you stand out? But basically, understanding what the whole range of possibilities is. A lot of people, especially the ones who are more experienced, ironically think, I've done this a million times. I could do it in my sleep. I'm just going to wing it. And you never want to wing it. You always want to prepare because you may think you know what's going to happen,
Oh,
but until you start talking to them, and that's the other thing, you want to be more of a listener. There have been studies show that the best negotiators listen about 40% of the, or rather talk 40% of the time and listen 65% of the time. And what's even more interesting is some of the experts who do this research, when they look at their own negotiations, they see that they're not doing that. They tend to talk more than they realize they are. When you talk, you don't learn anything. When you listen to the other guy, that's when you learn. So you want to get them talking as much as possible. Even if you've already asked the question, ask it again, ask it a different way, see if the answers are consistent, and just look for openings. They may say something innocent that you can really capitalize on.
Wouldn't you say also walk into that room with confidence? Because a lot of times the underdog is who they're rooting for. It was kind of what you said a minute ago. I won that contract with Anheuser-Busch because I was the underdog, but boy, I had that fighting spirit and they wanted somebody like that. They wanted somebody who was hungry
They
and
may want the fighting spirit. They may want somebody who's just really likable. They
Mhm.
may want somebody who's professional. You're not sure what they're looking for. You can't really assume. But as you suggest, confidence and psychology in general are critical. If you think this guy's got all the cards, there's no way I'm going to get a good deal out of this, then that's probably what's going to happen. But if you believe you've got the power, then to a fairly large extent you do.
Yeah, yeah. So what sometimes you're in a situation where they might give you like an ultimatum, take it or leave it. And you don't want to take it and you don't want to leave it. How would you do a workaround with that?
Well, a lot of times when they say take it or leave it, it's because they're frustrated. They're not getting the outcome they wanted, they're panicking, and they're ready to give up. So they try to force the issue. They may not want it, but they painted themselves into a corner so they can't back away. So what there's actually about 4 or 5 things you can do, but the main thing is take it or leave it is an A or B choice. Take it as A, leave it as B. If you can introduce a new possibility, C, now it's not A or B. You've also got C, and now you're negotiating maybe C is the answer. So the negotiation continues.
Oh, that's good. Bring in a new option. It's like
Another thing you
they
can
paint
do
themselves into a corner.
Yeah, another thing you can do is just keep talking and create a buffer in time so that eventually you can work your way back. All right, I think your last offer was this, and we were talking like this. And they sort of forget that they said take it or leave it. And they're looking for that out. They're looking for you to pretend it never happened so that they can get back to business.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, yeah. It's like don't paint people into a corner. I knew that. Don't do that. So I know you've written this book, Win Win to Negotiations. Tell us a little bit about the book and where we find the book.
Okay, the book is actually sort of a standalone version of an earlier book I had written. A publisher had approached me to write a negotiation book for a series they were doing in about 2010, I think. And after 10 years, they were discontinuing the series. Nobody wants to keep a book on their bookshelves, the store's bookshelves for 10 years. So they asked me, would you like to re release it as a standalone? But I didn't want to do the same book. I wanted to use my own voice. I didn't want to have all of the restraints that a big publisher imposes, tell my own stories. So I changed about 20-25% of it and added a lot of my own stories and personal touch. And we re-released it a couple of years ago. And it's published by Marshall Cavendish Business, which is out of London. And I know it was selling on Amazon. It's in a few different languages. So Amazon or Marshall Cavendish's website would have it.
Very good. Now, are you still practicing law?
Not really. I'm thinking about going back because there's certain aspects of it that I miss, but I still like the speaking business and training and the travel that comes with it. So I'm just keeping my options open like any good negotiator.
I was gonna say that's some good negotiating. So, David, if someone wanted to bring you in as a speaker for their organization, how can they reach you?
Easiest way is just to email me, david at davidgoldwich.com, or you can go to the website. I'm not a big believer in websites because for this business, it's usually a word of mouth referral or a phone call. They're not going to do an online search and say, wow, this is the best website I've ever seen. I've got to hire this guy. So the website is there, but the email is the quickest way.
Okay. And we'll put that in our show notes for you. So I have a signature question I like to ask all my guests. Our success through connections, everything is through a connection. So can you share a story with us today, David, about a time when an opportunity presented itself to you because of a relationship that you had?
It happens a lot, especially in the speaking business, because speakers often refer their friends. If you just spoke for a big company, chances are they're not going to use you again right away. But if you can recommend a friend who's going to do a good job for them, then they're happy. They feel grateful to you, and you stay on their radar while helping your friend who's going to do the same for you. So, a couple of years ago, I was in Singapore, and a good friend of mine and colleague there had a gig in Kathmandu. That's a place most people never get to. And it was a big conference, and they were looking for another speaker, but the budget was tight. So my friend said, all right, instead of first class or business class, I'll go coach, and then you'll have enough money to fly him over. So I came with him, spoke at the conference, actually gave the keynote for the whole conference. And also they set me up with an afternoon at a one of the telecoms, and I got paid for that, all because a friend was thinking of me and thought I would be a good fit.
That
So, not yeah, that was a pretty big deal
that
for
is a big
me.
deal. Look where you got to go.
Yeah, and we were there. I did one day at the conference, one day for the client, and then I had 4 other days of just sightseeing. They were pretty generous about the accommodations and letting us stay a while. So it was a great opportunity.
That's a great story, I love it. Well, David, I wanna thank you for being with me today, I really appreciate it. I've been like I said, I've been wanting to get you on the show for a while now. So that is our show for this week, everyone, and just remember, success is not created in isolation, it's through the connections that we have, so keep connecting, and let's you and I connect.
All right. Thank you, Zelda.